Well, as the counting of the U.S. election results continue and Joe Biden heads closer to victory, analysts are already asking what the presidency of the former vice president of the United States would mean for Africa. It is worthy of note that the most memorable demonstration of Joe Biden's position and beliefs on Africa is the 1986 Senate engagement on the issue of apartheid South Africa. The then 43-year-old senator spoke passionately and questioned the U.S. policy, highlighting the need to end apartheid, which was repressive to black South Africans. Well, joining us to discuss the record-making and record-breaking election and the implications of its outcome on Africa is a political analyst from the Southern African Times, Farai Muvuti. Farai, good to see you.
Thank you for having me yet again.
Looking at the American elections, would you say Africa takes any stage, not even the center stage now? Do you think that Africa takes any priority at all? I mean, watching just the campaigns, the debates that are held, I barely heard anything about Africa. What's your take?
Very good points that you've made. But I think what we've seen from the Biden campaign, for instance, just yesterday, the Southern African Times reported on his campaign drive towards engaging the African diaspora. So what we saw taking center stage, unlike other campaigns, for instance, Trump, our constituency was indeed ignored, and he focused more on the Latino vote and the Cuban vote, but the African diaspora was not a vote that was considered. But out of all the candidates, what we did see is Biden actually write a full report on the African diaspora and how he intended to engage the African diaspora and its extended and the African continent on the basis of mutual respect. So we did see a change there. So there was representation, but it was not publicized, as it were. But yes, we seem to have played a role in there, and I think it would be. It's quite pitiful, actually, that it was not a prominent messaging point, purely because, Africa, we are the fastest growing continent. All top eight economies that are indexed to be the emerging economies with the fastest growing GDP rate are in Africa. So that may have been a mishap. But what we did see from Biden, which is probably complimentary, is that we were featured on his website, and there were policies and strategies and sort of like terms of engagement of how he intends to rebuild the bilateral relations between the continent.
Farai, African Americans make up quite some number in America, but Trump's administration came up with these stringent immigration laws that now make it very hard and tough for Africans, to get into the U.S., even to study. Do you see a tweaking or a total overhaul of that policy if Biden eventually takes the seat of power?
Well, I think when we're looking at the immigration aspect of it, I think they will be tweaking. Biden historically has been someone who's looked at. I mean, if we're to consider the work that they did in the Obama administration, there was a lot of work in terms of through their Africa leadership programs, in terms of student education, expanding that program into America, and there were quite a number of engagements with African students, with the administration directly. So we might see, and he does say it on his website, that we're going to see a resuscitation and a continuation of that engagement. Now, the question is, will that impact the current immigration policies? Well, that is yet to be seen. But it wouldn't be far-fetched to assert that might be the case.
Thanks, Farai. And I must say you wrote an in-depth article on this, which was a great read, one that I recommend to all of our viewers. That was a great read. And you suggested in that article that there may be hope for Zimbabwe if Joe Biden is to win. However, we do know that under the President Obama administration, sanctions on Zimbabwe were extended and prolonged throughout, the same way throughout the Trump administration they were as well. Do you feel as though President Mnangagwa's administration has been able to instill enough trust for this to change if there is a potential Biden win?
Just a point of correction. It was written by one of our analysts, Kundai Vambe. He actually jotted the article, which I give him a lot of credit for. My duty was to merely edit. But yeah, going to your question, The Zimbabwean question is quite. It would need to look at the background, because the actual law, Zidera, which is the sanction that you are relating to, added on top with if you are to add with the few add-ons of the presidential, executive, bilateral restrictions that have been added. Biden actually sponsored the law together with Hillary Clinton and Jesse Helms in 2000. So the question would be, would he is sobering of mind in terms of his international engagement with, say, the Cuba point, which Obama did towards his exit out of administration. The question is, would that similar approach of engagement be the case? At the time, when Biden and Obama were in administration, there was no Mnangagwa administration. It was a Mugabe administration whose strategy was to be isolationist and to be somewhat antagonist to in terms of the approach of their foreign policy. Whereas we're seeing with Mnangagwa, with the President Mnangagwa, he wants to have engagement and dialogue. That has not been helpful with the Trump administration, because the Trump administration's foreign policy towards Africa in general has been very abrasive. So there is potential for engagement. We just yet to see if these yardsticks that Trump had put in place would be the same yardsticks that Biden would continue with, but it would be a dichotomy, if you will, because and almost a contradictory if you're to look at the overall narrative that he has projected as it concerns Africa.
Indeed, but this even predates the Trump administration. The U.S. has been falling behind on the continent, and we've seen the likes of China, Russia, and other superpowers filling in those spaces. But Farai, how high are the stakes for the continent in a potential Biden administration?
I think the way we should posit this question should be very different. We should, as the continent itself, being in a position to leverage its opportunities. We've seen a very abrasive foreign policy from America. If you're to look at just Nigerian president, for instance, blacklisted, if you're to look at the withdrawal from the climate change agreement, the international climate change agreement, which the Paris climate change agreement had a strong impact on Southern African countries, because we were hit hard the most, and so this impacted Africa's potential growth, whose majority of economies are growth based. So these are critical questions, and America should ask itself, not Africa to ask ourselves. What Africa should be looking to do is to leverage the sober-mindedness in terms of foreign relations. We have the capacity of growth, we have the resource, and we are seeing a lot of growth in terms of our bilateral relations with the global South, and it's to further extend those relations with the global South, and then leverage that with America. So America should come to the table, because Africa is on the mountain. So they should come to us. So I think how we frame it is equally important.
All right, Farai, very briefly, let's still discuss more on trade. Donald Trump's America First policy will drastically affect countries like Lesotho, who could lose 46,000 jobs if the AGOA is not renewed.
Yeah.
Now, do you see Joe Biden showing interest in renewing that? Very, very briefly.
Now, so what we can only base it on is what he has said. He has said that he wants to strengthen bilateral relations with Africa. He wants to build strategic mutual relations that are equally economically beneficial. So if we're to base it on that, then it should mean a reversal of very abrasive and harsh policies. So we've looked at climate change. We've looked at economic engagement, which have been dropping as a point of engagement. We've looked at our bilateral relations with the United States. As a continent, they have been diminished. So it is his job to now actually follow up on that promise and to ensure that he preserves that very policy orientation that he projected.
Certainly. We'll wait and see how it all plays out. Many thanks to you, Farai Muvuti, a political analyst with the Southern African Times.